Please sit down and we'll now have our reading.
This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judea and his brothers, Judea the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife.
Solomon, the father of Rehoboam, Rehoboam the father of Abijah, Abijah the father of Asa, and Asa the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat the father of Jehoram, Jehoram the father of Uzziah, Uzziah the father of Jotham, and Jotham the father of Ahaz, Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, Manasseh the father of Ammon, Ammon the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah, and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon. After the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah the father of Shealtiel, Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, Zerubbabel the father of Abihud, Abihud the father of Eliakim, Eliakim the father of Azor, Azor the father of Zadok, Zadok the father of Achim, Achim the father of Elihud, Elihud the father of Eleazar, Eleazar the father of Mathan, Mathan the father of Jacob,
And Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary is the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. This is the word of the Lord.
Sorry, there's a little bit more. Thus there were 14 generations in all, from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to Messiah. This is also the word of the Lord.
Never sure who to feel more sorry for when we've got Matthew 1:17 as the person doing the reading or the person having to do the talk. Do you know what? You've already given them a round of applause, but can we give them another one? It's getting well done. Thank you very much, Nikki and Mary. Now, my bucket of gravel. Andy, you hyped up my bucket of gravel. It's just going to be a weight, I'm afraid. There's nothing exciting about my bucket of gravel other than to weigh down this Christmas tree. Or the very bland Christmas tree at the moment. So I'm just going to pour my gravel in there. And hopefully you can let go and it'll be okay. Yes. I might pull you up in an emergency. Now, does anyone like decorating Christmas trees? No. Really? There's got no one likes decorating. Who likes decorating Christmas trees, honestly? Come on. Well, I was going to, as you might look at this, it's a bit bland, it's a bit rubbish. So we are going to decorate it this morning. So I wonder if there are any young people that want to come to the front, might be able to give me a hand a little bit later decorating this Christmas tree. Because this isn't any ordinary Christmas tree. This is actually a genealogy. Genealogy. The genealogy that we just had talks about Jesus' family tree. And I'm going to use this tree here, this Christmas tree, to help us find out what on earth Matthew was trying to say as he wrote this genealogy. It's a very long genealogy that Nikki and Mary very helpfully took us through. And you kind of think, well, if someone is going to write a best-selling New York Times bestseller, why on earth would you start with a genealogy? I don't know that Matthew got the memo of being like, if you're going to start a book, if you're going to write something and keep people's interest, I wouldn't start with a long list of unpronounceable names. But there's a reason that Matthew did it, and we're going to look at that reason this morning, because this is Jesus. There we go. He's at the top of this family tree, and we're going to see why it is that Matthew included some of these names on this family tree. So Jesus there, up at the top. But I think a quick introduction to who Matthew is might be helpful at this point, because Matthew was one of the 12 disciples. Believe that Matthew, the tax collector, that we see in his gospel, we see in other gospels as well, that he is the one who wrote down this gospel. So Matthew would have been pretty good at maths. He was chosen to be a tax collector for the Romans at the time. He would have been good at maths. He would have been pretty switched on chap. And so we can think, and we can pretty much be confident that there's a reason behind what he's written in Matthew, in the first 17 verses of what he wrote. We can be pretty confident that he's designed this family tree, with Jesus at the top, designed it in a certain way to tell us something really important. Now, the only tricky thing is, he did do that, but a lot of the things that he kind of hid into this genealogy, these kind of messages that he was trying to get across, well, the first people reading this were Jewish. They would have been living in Israel, and as they were reading, they would have thought, I see what Matthew's doing. Oh, that's interesting. Now, for us, 2,000 years later in Buckland Monachorum, we might look at this list and think, well, they're just ridiculous names, aren't they? I mean, why is that person included? What's this about 14? Why is 14 generations involved? So it's a bit harder for us to think about just how amazing this family tree is. But we are going to see hopefully, some really helpful things this morning with the help of our tree and the help of some decorators a little bit later. Now, does anyone like a whodunit story? Does anyone like a mystery, an Agatha Christie, or maybe an Enid Blyton, famous guy, a bit of a whodunit? Yes, well, it's a little bit, jumping into Matthew chapter 1, we're kind of jumping in at the ending of the whodunit story, when we've got actually the whole of the Old Testament, if you like, the beginning of this story. We're jumping in at kind of the answer, the solution to the problem. We've skipped forward to the who did it of the Old Testament. But as we see in the coming weeks, and we're going to be looking at a bit more of Matthew in the first few chapters, we actually would be probably doing ourselves a service if we took back a moment and looked at a little bit of the Old Testament, because that's going to help us to understand some of this genealogy. And so what we're going to do, actually, there are some moments where, when you have Netflix, iPlayer, Amazon Prime, whatever you use, you're watching through your program. Normally, if you're just watching 6 episodes in a go, you don't need the recap, and so you hit the skip recap button. The button I'm talking about, you haven't got time for the recap. You don't need a recap, you're just watching them all. Well, for us, we're going to have a bit of a recap button. And it looks suspiciously like a drum cymbal on a chair. But it's actually a helpful recap button, because when you press this button here, a whole range of voices come together and they say, previously in the Old Testament. Do you know it does that? So if I press it, all of a sudden you hear lots of voices saying, previously in the Old Testament. Watch this, ready? Previously in the Old Testament. Look at that, excellent. So we've got our recap button here, and that's going to be coming into use a little bit later as well, because we're going to need to see a bit of previously what's been going on in the Old Testament. But Matthew, here we go. Matthew sets the stage, chapter 1, verse 1. He puts his story right on the end of the Old Testament scriptures. It's like a continuation. It's like Matthew saying, right, everything in the Old Testament, we're continuing the story. Don't forget all that stuff in the past. We need that stuff in the past. This is all about the continued story. So Matthew's way of showing us that Jesus fulfills all of the Old Testament promises is to begin with the genealogy. And there are two key people mentioned in that genealogy. I feel bad for saying I had to read all of those names when there are two key people in there, but we're going to focus really on the two key people in that genealogy. Matthew tells us that there are two people who are really, really important when it comes to Jesus' history, when it comes to his ancestors. The first verse, the record of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David. He's our first important character in Jesus' family tree. David, really important. But it didn't finish there. The genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of, can you remember who it was? The son of Abraham. You see, Matthew then did go on to write a whole list of those generations. All those generations. But he starts verse 1 telling us actually the two key people for what he's about to write. The son of David, the son of Abraham. So we're seeing straight from the outset that Matthew's not just writing this because he thinks that genealogies are fun and exciting to read. They're not. They're quite confusing. No, Matthew's doing this because he wants to point out there's something important about these people. He's the son of David and he's the son of Abraham. That's going to tell us something about Jesus' identity, and that's going to tell us something about Jesus' mission. So we're going to start with the very bottom of his family tree, where he goes and talks about the son of Abraham. By calling Jesus the son of Abraham, Matthew, what he's doing there is he's connecting Jesus to the father of the people of Israel, Abraham. He's connecting Jesus, saying there's a connection between Jesus and the father of the Israelite people. Abraham represents that moment. Do you remember when God selects and separates his family from the rest of the nations, all the way back in Genesis? It was through these Israelite people that God promised to bring blessing. God promised to bring blessing, not just to his people, but to all humanity. I can feel a recap button coming on. Do you remember what you need to say? So we've got previously in the Old Testament. Excellent. Previously in the Old Testament. And here we have, if I pick my right recap scroll. Does anyone want to undo my recap scroll here? Isaac, you're keen down at the bottom. Here's my recap scroll. Take that one for me. Previously in the Old Testament, can you unravel it? What have we got there?
God said to Abraham, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse them. All
Yeah.
earth will be blessed through you. Genesis
Chapter 12,
verse
1 to 3. Super, thank you, Jeff. Here we go. From our recap button, all the way back in Genesis chapter 3, we saw these promises given to Abraham. The Lord said to Abraham, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all people on earth will be blessed through you. See, God promised to Abraham that his family would be a blessing to all people. That was the best emoji of blessing I could find. You see, by linking Jesus to Abraham, Matthew's bringing the reader's attention right back to those promises in Genesis that God made to Abraham, of God's rescue plan for the whole world. He wants us to see that Jesus is the long-awaited rescuer, the long-awaited son of Abraham, who will bring God's blessing to all of humanity. So that's Abraham. But what about David? Why is he important in this family tree? Well, Jesus' identity as the son of David is actually a huge focus throughout Matthew's gospel. This is the first time out of 10 that he mentions this phrase, son of David, throughout his gospel. For Matthew, he really wants to get this message home. Son of David. There is a link between Jesus and King David. You see, Abraham's name showed us that Jesus belonged to the Israelite people, that he was going to bring blessing. David's name shows that there's royalty in this line. Jesus was royalty. He wants us to see that David, as a king, was the father of, eventually, Jesus. So that Jesus is a rightful heir to the throne of David. And we can be pretty sure that because you might know that there's another genealogy in Luke's Gospel, and some people will look at those and say, well, how can they be different? But the reason Matthew was focusing on David, he goes on to use Solomon as the line that he follows from David to get to Jesus. Luke uses actually David's son Nathan. And so why does Matthew choose Solomon? And it's for this very reason. He wants us to see that Jesus is a rightful heir to the throne. Matthew's trying to show us that Jesus is a royal successor. He's an heir to the throne of David. I think we need a bit of a recap.
In the Old Testament.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Is Isaac our recap master today? Isaac, it's all down to you at the moment. Do you know what? If you come up here, actually, Isaac, can you squeeze in there? This time I'm going to give you a bit of my microphone so you can come in here, because I thought you read that fantastically. Read this one as well.
That night of the Lord came to Nathan, saying, "Tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever." 2 Samuel chapter 7.
Thank you, Isaac. Brilliant. Yes. Our recap here from 2 Samuel chapter 7. God makes promises to David saying, your throne will be established forever. Well, hold on a second. King David died, and so did his ancestors. How can this forever throne come to pass? Well, Matthew's telling us it's Jesus. Jesus is the royal heir to this throne, whose kingdom is going to last forever. He's the one who's going to bring the blessings of Abraham. He's the royal son of David that all of Israel has been waiting for. He's the who of the whodunit, or who's going to do it in the Old Testament. He will be the King of Israel who blesses all of the nations of the world. And we know all of this because of Matthew's genealogy, this long list of names. And he's carefully arranged it in this way. But you might be thinking, okay, well what's this got to do with me? Where do I fit into this? This genealogy, it's in the Bible. I guess they're pretty special people here. We've got Abraham, the father of the Israelite nation. We've got King David. What's that got to do with me 2,000 years later in Buckland Monachorum? But that's just the thing. When God says he's going to use his people to bring blessing to everyone, and eventually, as we see through these descendants, actually we get to Jesus and we hear that Jesus is going to come to bless all people. Well, that all people doesn't just include these special ones here. It includes you and it includes me. Jesus has come to show us and to give us God's blessing. He's come to be our King as well, not just today, but forever. And we're just going to take a final quick look at some names that pop up on this genealogy, because I think it's really important, because there were 4 women who show up in this genealogy. It'd be unusual, particularly in Hebrew writing, and when you write down a genealogy, you would tend to just include males down the male lineage. But Matthew's at pains again to include some females, and you might think, okay, I think I know which females he might choose. I think he might choose, Abraham's wife Sarah, and Rebecca and Rachel. They're all the matriarchs of Israel. They're pretty respectable people to include in the family line. But no, I wonder, Isaac, if you could come up and do a bit of decorating for me as well. I've got some baubles here. And you just hang them on whichever hooks you can find. Got that one as well. You see, these ladies that turn up in this family tree would not necessarily be the ones that his readers back then would be expecting. In fact, they might even be a little bit embarrassed. Matthew, what are you doing? The wife of Uriah. Well, hang on, that's Bathsheba. David, you don't want to mention that, David. Matthew, yeah, I'm not sure you should include. Ruth, in the summer we looked at Ruth, didn't we? She was a Moabitess. She wasn't even an Israelite. She's not part of God's special Matthew, what are you doing? Don't include her. Why are you mentioning her in a family tree? But that's the whole point. Matthew is showing us that God's family tree, through the ages, even from Abraham, all the way to Jesus, actually includes those people on the outside, those people who we might not expect a holy, a righteous God to be involved with. You see, God includes all people in his family, and in this kingdom of God that he's creating, he includes the outcasts. He includes those people that we might think, really? Is God interested in them? And actually a little bit closer to home, I wonder how many of us might think sometimes, God's not interested in me, surely. There are more important people that he could deal with. No. If God truly knew what I was like, no. There's no way he'd include me in his family tree. But wonderfully through Jesus, we see that exactly the opposite. Jesus wants to include everybody. And in fact, we've got our final recap button here. Isaac, are you ready? We're going to go.
Previously in the Old Testament.
But we fast forwarded a little bit and we've gone into the New Testament, because actually, right at the end of Matthew's Gospel, are you ready? I'll give you that and I'll pass you my microphone. This is Jesus speaking.
Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Matthew verse 9.
Brilliant. Thank you, Isaac. You see, Matthew, right at the end of his book, shows us that actually this family tree, right at the start of his book, was going to expand even further. And it was going to include not just the special people, not just people who we might think, yeah, they're important enough. They've done something worthwhile. No, Jesus, when he comes and speaks to his disciples before he returns to his Father in heaven, he says, go and make disciples of all nations, just as my family tree has shown in the past that all people are welcome into this kingdom. Actually, I want you now to go, and I want you to spread my word to the whole world. Now, I wasn't sure whether to do this or not because it sometimes falls off, but there we go. There we go. There we go. The whole world. Yeah, is that around? So Jesus wants his blessing to come to the whole world. And so where does that leave us this morning? Well, I wonder about this Christmas time when we think about the arrival of this Saviour, of this King who's come to bring blessing. First of all, is he your King? In a minute we're going to hear a song by the group Awesome Cutlery, but the words of a little, I guess it's a little rap that comes at the end, don't come up on the screen. But if you listen carefully, there's some really interesting words, because he talks about this King of the universe, the King of all continents, the King of all our country, the King of our streets, this King of our homes. And then, actually, is he your King? Because he's King, he's sitting on his throne, whether that suits you or not, he is King. Are you going to welcome him as King? Maybe this Christmas time it might be the first time you really think about doing that personally. Or what about this message at the end that Jesus, the rightful King, gives us? Go and make disciples. Go, take my blessing and tell others of it. Perhaps this Christmas time is an opportunity for you to do that, to say to someone, hey, would you like to come along to our carols? Would you like to come along to who's orange? Chris Ingles, that's the one. Andy's doing that service this year. Chris Ingles, come to a Chris Ingles service. Come along, hear about this King, hear about the blessing that he's come to bring. I'm going to finish there. I feel that I've done the tree a bit of a disservice. It is an amazing family tree, and it does include, I was going to do a bit of tinsel, because Matthew even includes a couple of spelling mistakes on purpose in his genealogy, but I'm not going to go into that or spoil that for you. Maybe you could look into that another time. A few spelling mistakes and even some mathematical error. You'd think as a tax collector he might be pretty good with his maths, but he even makes a couple of intentional maths mistakes. But I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to pray, and then we're going to hear this song about this amazing King. Gracious Father, thank you so much for Jesus. Thank you that he came into a world of darkness that rejected you, that rejected him. But thank you that even in that, he came as the rightful heir, the rightful King, who is now on his throne. Thank you that he came to bring blessing, even blessing to those who rejected him and who despised him. Thank you that he came to bring blessing to us. Pray that as we explore Matthew's Gospel over the next few weeks, that something of his kingship and something of his blessing will strike us afresh by your Spirit. That we would want to welcome him indeed as the King of our lives and understand his blessings more fully. Amen. that song's going to play, and I'm going to